The rain in Kiev wasn't the gentle, cleansing kind. It was a cold, persistent drizzle, a weeping grey that seemed to mirror the mood hanging over the city. June 13th, 2025. 5 years since the initial invasion, 5 years of grinding attrition, and against all predictions, Ukraine had won. Not in a glorious, decisive victory splashed across headlines. It was a slow, agonizing accumulation of successes, a relentless wearing down of Russian forces coupled with a stunningly effective Ukrainian adaptation that had transformed the conflict into something unrecognizable to the analysts who'd predicted a swift Russian triumph back in 2022. The victory wasn't built on any single brilliant tactical maneuver, though those certainly existed. It was built on a complex web of factors and Western support that hadn't faltered despite escalating global tensions. Ukrainian resilience, fueled by an almost pathological refusal to concede, and crucially, a Russian military that had simply broken. Not in a dramatic collapse, but a slow, systematic unraveling of logistics, morale, and leadership. The shift began subtly, almost imperceptibly, around late 2024. The initial waves of assaults against Avdiivka, Vuhledar, and Kurakhove, previously considered key objectives for Russia, stalled. Then they faltered. And then, slowly, the pace of Russian advances ceased entirely. It wasn't a Ukrainian offensive so much as a sustained, localized pressure applied across multiple fronts, each carefully calibrated to exploit weaknesses in the already strained Russian lines. The intelligence picture had fundamentally changed. The initial reliance on Western satellite imagery and signals intelligence had been supplemented dramatically by a network of clandestine operatives embedded deep within Russia's military command structure. These weren't traditional spies. They were disillusioned officers, former GRU analysts, and even hackers who'd infiltrated Russian systems, feeding Ukraine a constant stream of information about troop movements, supply routes, and crucially, the internal dysfunction plaguing Moscow. The Drapati Initiative, as it became known, named after General Andriy Drapati, the architect of this intelligence network, was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The Sumy sector had been the first domino to fall. The initial Russian push, utilizing repurposed Soviet-era amphibious assault vehicles and leveraging the flat terrain, had been anticipated. But Ukraine, anticipating this exact tactic, deployed layers of anti-tank weaponry, particularly advanced, domestically produced Volk systems that decimated the Russian advance. The capture of Sumy itself was a symbolic blow, but more importantly, it exposed a critical vulnerability in Russia's logistical chain: the ability to rapidly deploy and sustain forces across vast distances. The 190 square kilometers captured in 2 days were a testament to Ukrainian adaptability and, frankly, Russian overconfidence. Kupiansk/Oskil River was another key turning point. The initial attempts to cross the Oskil using improvised rafts and small assault teams had been countered by a sophisticated network of minefields, largely constructed by repurposed agricultural drones, and an overwhelming barrage of artillery fire directed at any potential crossing points. The Russian failure to secure Kupiansk demonstrated a critical flaw in their operational planning, a lack of understanding of the Ukrainian terrain, and more importantly, a failure to adequately prepare for asymmetric warfare. Donetsk-Dnipropetrovsk had been the most challenging sector, dominated by brutal urban combat around Kurakhove. The protracted siege, however, exposed Russia's reliance on heavy mechanized forces, slow, cumbersome, and vulnerable to Ukrainian drone swarms and precision artillery strikes. The near-total control of Toretsk, 90%, according to Ukrainian estimates, was a strategic victory, securing vital transportation corridors and denying Russia access to key industrial zones. But the real transformation wasn't in specific battles. It was in Ukraine's overall approach to warfare. The initial reliance on Western equipment had been gradually supplemented by an unprecedented level of domestic innovation. The drone industry, spearheaded by companies like Buran systems and Skyfa technologies, had exploded, driven by a combination of government funding and the urgent need for self-sufficiency. The tenfold increase in drone production, aiming for 50% of military needs internally by 2025, wasn't just about numbers. It was about creating a highly adaptable, technologically advanced force capable of operating effectively across all fronts. The Volk system, initially a prototype, had become the backbone of Ukrainian anti-tank defense, its effectiveness directly attributed to the intelligence provided by the Drapati initiative. The nature of the war itself had shifted dramatically. It was no longer a conventional conflict. It was a protracted, multi-layered campaign of attrition punctuated by localized breakthroughs and devastating counterattacks. The daily shelling, thousands of projectiles impacting across the front lines, became almost normalized, a grim soundtrack to Ukrainian life. Drone attacks, often utilizing sophisticated AI-powered targeting systems, were equally frequent, disrupting supply lines, crippling infrastructure, and relentlessly harassing Russian forces. The use of Shard drones, reaching up to 479 in a single night during intensified assaults around Avdiivka, highlighted the evolving nature of warfare, a battlefield dominated by persistent, low-cost aerial threats. The human cost remained horrific. Russia's casualty figures exceeding 1 million total, with approximately 250,000 killed, were staggering, but Ukrainian losses, estimated between 60,000 and 100,000 soldiers, were equally devastating. The demographic impact was profound, particularly in the eastern regions, where entire villages had been depopulated by relentless shelling and fighting. Ukrainian reforms within the military weren't just about replacing equipment. They were about fundamentally restructuring command and control. Drapati's Culture of Fear initiative, a brutal but necessary intervention aimed at dismantling a hierarchical structure riddled with corruption and bureaucratic inertia, proved surprisingly effective. He replaced senior officers based on merit and performance, fostering a more agile, responsive force capable of rapid decision-making. The international support remained crucial, though its character had evolved. Western aid continued to flow, air defense systems, heavy weapons, and funding, but it was now underpinned by a deeper understanding of Ukrainian capabilities and strategic priorities. The Rome defense ministers' meeting, warning of escalation risks, wasn't driven by alarmism. It reflected the reality of a strategically stable situation. Ukraine, bolstered by Western support and its own military reforms, was holding firm against a demoralized and increasingly isolated Russia. The expanded U.S. military presence in Denmark, greenlit by President Olsen, represented more than just a symbolic gesture. It provided crucial logistical support and enhanced intelligence-gathering capabilities. The POW exchanges, totaling 66 since the war began, were a testament to both Ukrainian resilience and Russian desperation. The inclusion of injured soldiers and underage conscripts underscored the brutal reality of the conflict, a war where no one truly won. But the most significant factor in Ukraine's victory wasn't any single weapon or strategy. It was the unwavering determination of the Ukrainian people. They had faced unimaginable horrors, endured relentless attacks, and lost countless loved ones. Yet they refused to surrender, clinging to their homeland with a tenacity that defied all predictions. Looking back from June 13, 2025, the war in Ukraine wasn't a dramatic, decisive victory. It was something far more complex, a slow, grinding accumulation of successes achieved through adaptation, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of advantage. Russia hadn't collapsed, it had simply been exhausted. Its military, hampered by logistical failures, poor leadership, and the constant pressure exerted by Ukrainian forces, had become a liability rather than an asset. The situation was still precarious. Russia continued to hold significant territory in eastern Ukraine, primarily around Donetsk and Luhansk, but its offensive capabilities were severely diminished. The buffer zone Russia desperately sought, a fortified line stretching across the eastern plains, remained elusive, largely due to Ukrainian resistance and Western support. The outlook remained deadlocked, brutal, slow, and with no immediate prospect of a ceasefire. Summer 2025 was expected to bring intensified fighting, particularly as Russia attempted to consolidate its gains in the Donbass region. However, Ukraine's defensive posture was now significantly stronger, bolstered by advanced weaponry, a highly skilled military force, and a population united behind a common purpose. As the rain continued to fall over Kiev, a sense of cautious optimism permeated the city. It wasn't a celebration, it was a recognition of hard-won gains and a grim acknowledgement of the long road ahead. The victory in Ukraine hadn't ushered in an era of peace. It had simply transformed a catastrophic conflict into a protracted stalemate, a testament to the enduring power of human resilience, strategic adaptation, and the unexpected consequences of asymmetrical warfare. The world had changed irrevocably, and Ukraine, battered but unbowed, stood as a symbol of defiance against tyranny and a stark reminder that even in the darkest hours, hope could endure. The analysts who'd predicted Russia's swift victory back in 2022 were now relegated to footnotes, cautionary tales of misjudgment and underestimation. The true story of Ukraine wasn't one of triumph or tragedy. It was one of survival, a slow, agonizing, but ultimately decisive testament to the will of a nation.